My name is Teresa, a 32-year-old marketing executive in Chicago, with what I thought was a complicated but loving relationship with my younger sister Olivia. 6 months ago, I was thrilled when she got engaged eagerly, offering to help plan her perfect day. Then came that Thursday afternoon when my phone buzzed with a group text from Olivia: "You're not invited to the wedding. Goodbye, loser." My stomach dropped when I saw my mother had added a heart emoji. After years of financial support and emotional investment, I simply replied, "Perfect, then I'll remove my payments from the account." They continued joking in the group chat, but by morning everything had changed. Let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if family drama stories resonate with you, because this one gets intense. Growing up, Olivia and I shared the kind of sisterly bond that I believed would last forever. With a 4-year age gap between us, I naturally took on the role of protective older sister. I braided her hair before school, defended her from neighborhood bullies, and even surrendered my desserts when she would look at me with those pleading eyes. We shared secrets under blanket forts and made pinky promises about being in each other's weddings someday. Those early memories still bring tears to my eyes when I think about how drastically things would change. Everything shifted when our parents announced their divorce during my freshman year of high school. At 14, I was devastated, but somewhat prepared for the reality of our disintegrating family. Olivia, only 10 at the time, was completely blindsided. The divorce created the first significant divide between us. While I processed my grief privately, Olivia acted out. She screamed, broke things, and refused to split her time between our parents' new separate homes. Looking back, I recognize these as normal responses to childhood trauma, but at the time, it placed me in an impossible position. With our mother working extra shifts to support us, and our father growing increasingly distant with his new girlfriend, I became the default caretaker. At 14, I was packing Olivia's lunches, helping with homework, and trying to provide emotional stability neither of our parents could offer consistently. This created a complicated dynamic that would follow us into adulthood, the pattern of me taking responsibility while Olivia received the majority of our parents' limited attention and sympathy. By the time I graduated high school, the roles were firmly established. I worked 2 part-time jobs to save for college, determined to build a stable future. Meanwhile, our mother funneled most of the family's limited resources toward making sure Olivia had the normal childhood I had supposedly already experienced. When I pointed out the disparity, I was labeled as selfish and reminded that Olivia is still just a child. College created another divide between us. I put myself through a state university with a combination of scholarships, student loans, and 30-hour work weeks. It was exhausting, but I graduated with a marketing degree that launched my career. Olivia, on the other hand, received significant financial support from both parents, who by then were competing for her affection. She attended 3 different colleges before finally getting a communications degree with virtually no student debt thanks to family support. Our 20s highlighted our different approaches to life. I worked my way up the corporate ladder, carefully saving and investing. By 30, I had a healthy retirement account, a condo in Chicago, and the financial stability I had craved since childhood. Olivia bounced between jobs, apartments, and relationships, facing a new crisis every few months. And with each crisis came the inevitable call for help. "Teresa, my car broke down. Can I borrow $2,000 until next month? Teresa, I got evicted because my roommate bailed. Can I stay with you for a few weeks? Teresa, I maxed out my credit cards. Can you help me figure out a payment plan?" Each time I said yes. Each time I told myself this was what sisters do for each other, and each time the promised repayments never materialized. Instead, Olivia would eventually show off a new designer purse or post vacation photos from weekend trips I couldn't afford, despite my better salary. When I gently mentioned these spending choices, she would explode with accusations that I was controlling and judgmental, claiming I only helped her so I could feel superior. Our mother never helped matters. Whenever conflict arose between us, she would soothe Olivia with comments like, "Your sister just doesn't understand what it's like for you," or "Teresa has always had things easier." These statements stung, especially given the reality of our respective journeys to adulthood. Despite all this, I kept trying to maintain a positive relationship. I sent birthday gifts, organized family gatherings, and continued to offer help when needed. I convinced myself that family bonds were worth the emotional and financial investment, even when they felt one-sided. When Olivia met Jason 3 years ago, I was genuinely hopeful. He seemed ambitious and grounded qualities I thought might help my sister find more stability. They dated for 2 years before getting engaged, and during that time I made sincere efforts to welcome him into our family. I invited them for holidays, sent thoughtful gifts, and expressed interest in his work in real estate development. But beneath Jason's charming veneer, I noticed concerning patterns. He frequently criticized Olivia's appearance and spending habits, yet regularly pressured her to maintain an expensive lifestyle to impress his wealthy family. He made dismissive comments about her career aspirations and subtly isolated her from longtime friends. When I attempted to discuss these observations with Olivia, she accused me of jealousy and trying to sabotage her happiness. Still, when they announced their engagement 6 months ago, I chose optimism. I wanted to believe that my sister had found someone who would make her happy despite my reservations. I pushed aside my concerns and prepared to fully support her through the wedding planning process, never imagining how painfully everything would unravel. The engagement party was a lavish affair hosted by Jason's parents at their suburban mansion. As I handed Olivia a card containing my heartfelt congratulations and a check for $1,000 as an engagement gift, she hugged me tightly. "I want you to be my maid of honor," she whispered. "Despite everything, you've always been there for me." Those words melted years of resentment. That evening, swept up in the celebration and renewed sisterly connection, I made an offer I would later regret. "I want to help make your wedding dreams come true," I told Olivia. "I can contribute $15,000 toward the expenses." The amount represented most of my carefully accumulated savings for a down payment on a larger condo, but seeing her face light up made it seem worthwhile. 2 days later, we went together to open a joint wedding account, where I deposited the first $5,000 with plans to add the rest in increments as expenses came due. The early wedding planning sessions were among the happiest times we'd shared as adults. We created Pinterest boards, visited venues, and discussed flower arrangements. Olivia seemed genuinely appreciative of my input, frequently texting me photos of dresses and decorations with messages like, "What do you think, and I value your opinion." For a few blissful weeks, I believed we had finally moved past our, quote, difficult history into a healthier relationship. Then came the dinner with Jason's parents, Harold and Vivian. While Olivia had described them as a bit traditional, nothing prepared me for their cold reception. Vivian scanned my outfit with a dismissive glance, while Harold interrogated me about my career, responding with barely concealed condescension. "Marketing, interesting choice. Not quite as stable as law or medicine, is it?" Harold remarked while swirling his expensive scotch. "And still single at your age. Focusing on career has its costs, I suppose." Throughout the evening, they made subtle digs about my apartment size, my practical sedan, and even my choice to wear minimal jewelry. When wedding discussion began, they dismissed the venues Olivia and I had researched as quaint and charming in tones that clearly meant inadequate and cheap. "We have connections at the Westfield," Vivian announced, naming one of the most exclusive venues in the region. "For our only son's wedding, nothing less will do." The venue alone would consume my entire contribution, but I stayed silent for Olivia's sake, watching her eyes shine with excitement. After that dinner, something fundamental changed. Olivia began canceling our planning sessions, explaining that Vivian had taken charge of various aspects. My texts about budgets went unanswered for days, then received vague replies like, "Don't worry about it," or "Jason's parents have it covered." Yet the withdrawals from our joint account continued steadily. $500 for a venue deposit, $2,000 for dress down payment, $750 for photographer retainer. When I asked for receipts or details, Olivia grew defensive. "Don't you trust me? This is my wedding, not yours," she snapped during a tense phone call. "If you're going to micromanage every dollar, maybe you should keep your money." "I'm not micromanaging," I explained carefully. "I just want to understand where the funds are going so I can budget my remaining contribution." "Whatever, Teresa. Not everyone needs color-coded spreadsheets for everything like you do." Our first major argument erupted when I discovered an $8,000 charge pending for what was listed as catering deposit. This exceeded both our discussed budget and the amount currently in the account. Olivia, we need to talk about this catering charge, I said when she finally answered my fifth call. It's going to overdraw the account. Oh, we upgraded the menu, she replied casually. Vivian found this amazing caterer who did her friend's daughter's wedding. Jason's parents are covering part of it. But why commit to this without discussing it? We agreed on a budget of $4,000 for food. God, you're so controlling. This is why no one wants to plan anything with you. It's my wedding day. Am I supposed to serve chicken fingers because my sister is cheap? The conversation devolved from there, with Olivia eventually hanging up on me. 20 minutes later, I received a call from our mother. Why are you giving Olivia such a hard time? She demanded without preamble. She's stressed enough without you pinching pennies on the most important day of her life. When I tried to explain the situation, she interrupted. You've always been so rigid with money, Teresa. Not everyone approaches life like a business transaction. This is about family and celebration, not spreadsheets and budgets. Despite my frustration, I transferred additional funds to cover the catering deposit. Later that week, I saw Instagram photos of Olivia Jason and his parents at a wine tasting event for the wedding. I hadn't been invited. Over the following months, my role in the wedding planning diminished while my financial contributions increased. Olivia would reach out primarily when vendor payments were due, often with urgent messages like, "Need $2,000 by tomorrow for the florist deposit. Can you transfer it to the account, thanks?" When I suggested meeting to review the overall budget and remaining expenses, she always had excuses. Too busy with work. Going to look at bridesmaids' dresses with Vivian. Jason's parents are taking us to dinner to discuss seating arrangements. Meanwhile, I began noticing how Jason subtly encouraged the growing distance between Olivia and me. When I'd call during their dinner, he'd loudly say, "Tell your sister we're busy," or, "Does she always check up on you this much?" At family gatherings, he would steer Olivia away from conversations with me, claiming someone else really needed to discuss something important with her. The dynamic reached a breaking point during a family dinner 3 weeks before the wedding. Jason's parents spent the evening discussing the lavish rehearsal dinner they were hosting at an exclusive country club, the luxury honeymoon they had gifted the couple, and the down payment they planned to contribute to the PAZ, newlyweds' first home. Throughout the conversation, they made pointed references to family, who understand the importance of generosity and supporting the couple properly. When I mentioned the $15,000 I had contributed to the wedding, Harold raised his eyebrows and said, "That's thoughtful. Though these days that barely covers flowers at a proper wedding." Vivian patted my hand condescendingly and added, "It's the sentiment that counts, dear. Not everyone has our resources, and I'm sure Olivia appreciates whatever you can manage." I looked to my sister for support, but she stared at her plate in silence. Later, when I expressed my hurt over being dismissed and disrespected, Olivia accused me of being oversensitive and trying to make her wedding about my feelings. "They're just different from your friends, Teresa," she said defensively. "They come from money and sometimes don't realize how they sound, but they're being incredibly generous." "And what about my generosity?" I asked quietly. "I've contributed almost my entire savings." "Well, no one asked you to do that," she replied coldly. "You offered. If it's such a burden, maybe you shouldn't have." That night, driving home alone, I realized how completely I had been sidelined in my sister's life, despite my emotional and financial investment in her happiness. Still, nothing prepared me for what would happen next. The day began like any other Thursday. I arrived at the office by 7:30, tackled my email backlog, and led a productive brainstorming session with my team for a new client campaign. By lunchtime, I was feeling accomplished and decided to treat myself to a proper meal instead of eating at my desk. The small Italian bistro across from my office had just served my favorite pasta dish when my phone buzzed with a group text notification. I nearly dropped my fork when I read the message from Olivia. "After a lot of consideration, we've decided to finalize the wedding guest list. You're not invited to the wedding. Goodbye, loser." I blinked, certain I had misread. Then the responses started flooding in. My mother had added a heart emoji and commented finally, "Now, the day can be perfect without drama." My Aunt Susan chimed in with laughing emojis. My cousin Diane wrote, "About time, no one wants Debbie Downer at a wedding." Jason's mother Vivian added, "A wise decision for your special day, sweetie. No need for unnecessary tension." My hand started shaking so badly that I knocked over my water glass. The waiter rushed over with extra napkins, his concerned expression making me realize tears were streaming down my face. I threw $40 on the table for a $20 meal and hurried outside, barely making it around the corner before a sob escaped my throat. Leaning against the brick wall of the building, I tried to make sense of what was happening. How could my family so casually and cruelly exclude me from my own sister's wedding, after everything I had done, after the thousands of dollars I had contributed? After all the times I had come to Olivia's rescue, flashbacks overwhelmed me. Olivia at 9 years old crying as I bandaged her scraped knee. Myself at 16 skipping a school dance to take her shopping for her first formal. The night I held her as she cried over her first heartbreak. The rent checks I had written when she was between jobs. The consistent, unwavering support I had provided for 28 years. My phone continued buzzing with notifications as more family members joined in the mockery. Uncle Rob Teresa probably already bought a boring beige dress to match her boring beige personality. Cousin Emma. Can you imagine her giving one of her lecture speeches as a toast? Dodged a bullet there? The casual cruelty stunned me. Had they always talked about me this way? Had I been the family joke all along? As the shock began to crystallize into resolve, I took a deep breath and composed my response. No tears, no begging, no emotional outburst. Instead, I wrote, "Perfect, then I'll remove my payments from the account." The response was immediate and dismissive. Olivia replied, "Whatever you always threaten but never follow through." My mother added, "Don't be petty, Teresa. It's just a wedding." You can watch the video later if you're so interested. Jason contributed his first message to the thread Drama Queen Alert. This is exactly why you're not invited. With shaking fingers but growing determination, I opened my banking app. The joint account Olivia and I had established for wedding expenses showed a current balance of $6,320. This represented the remainder of my promised $15,000 contribution, with $8,700 already spent on various deposits and payments. I initiated the transfer of all remaining funds back to my personal account, then took a screenshot of the confirmation. Part of me wanted to send it to the group chat immediately to prove I wasn't bluffing, but a deeper instinct told me to wait. Let them continue revealing their true feelings about me, and reveal they did. As I sat in my car, unable to return to work in my emotional state, the notifications continued. The family group chat became an increasingly vicious roast session with comments like, "Remember when Teresa tried to give Olivia financial advice? Like, who asked you? She's probably calculating the exact cents she spent on wedding gifts to demand back. I bet she'll show up anyway with a spreadsheet of reasons why. She should be let in." Most hurtful was my mother's message. "Honey, don't worry about Teresa's money. We all knew she'd try to hold it over your head eventually. That's why I suggested we get as much as possible before cutting her out." The premeditated nature of their actions hit me like a physical blow. They had planned this all along. They had intentionally taken my money while preparing to exclude me. With trembling hands, I scrolled back through older messages in the family chat. In a conversation from 3 weeks ago that I had missed, relatives had openly discussed using Teresa's money while joking about my eventual exclusion from the wedding. My cousin had written, "How much more can you get her to pay for before dropping the bomb?" Olivia had replied, "Jason thinks we can squeeze another $5,000 at least. She's so desperate to be involved, it's almost too easy." My own mother had added, "Just make sure you get the final payment for the photographer before telling her. That's the last big expense." The photographer. The $8,000 photographer I had agreed to pay for as my special contribution to preserving the memories of a day I would now be prohibited from attending. I closed the app, unable to bear any more. In the silence of my car, I finally allowed myself to break down completely. Great heaving sobs racked my body as I confronted the painful truth I had never been valued by my family. I had been an ATM, a convenience, a punchline, but never a beloved daughter or sister. When the worst of the crying subsided, I called my best friend Sarah. They did. What? She exclaimed after I explained the situation. Teresa, that's not just mean, that's financial abuse. They've been using you. I know, I whispered, my voice hoarse. I think I've always known, but I didn't want to believe it. Come over, she insisted. You shouldn't be alone right now. At Sarah's apartment, we reviewed the messages together. With each vicious comment she read, her outrage grew on my behalf. You need to block them all, she said firmly. At least temporarily, for your mental health. But what if? What if what? What if they suddenly realize they've been terrible and apologize? Teresa, they're showing you exactly who they are. Believe them. Following her advice, I muted notifications from the group chat and individual family members. I sent a brief email to my boss, explaining a family emergency had come up, then curled up on Sarah's couch with a blanket and the herbal tea she pressed into my hands. That night, lying on Sarah's guest bed, I stared at the ceiling and confronted years of financial manipulation. The emergency loans never repaid, the guilt trips when I hesitated to help, the dismissal of my own financial goals as selfish or materialistic while my support was taken for granted. By morning, through a sleepless night of reflection, my hurt had hardened into resolve. I would no longer set myself on fire to keep people warm who would not even offer me a blanket in return. The time had come to stand firm, whatever the consequences. Sarah's coffee maker gurgled to life at 6 a.m., its familiar sound a stark contrast to the surreal nightmare my life had become overnight. I had barely slept, spending most of the night drafting and redrafting an email documenting every penny I had contributed to Olivia's wedding. The final version included dates, amounts, and purposes, all meticulously organized in a way only a boring person like me would bother with. You're really going through with this? Sarah asked, handing me a steaming mug. I have to, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. If I back down now, nothing will ever change. My first call was to the bank confirming that my transfer had been processed and no further withdrawals could be made from the joint account without my approval. The customer service representative, hearing the tremor in my voice, was surprisingly sympathetic. We can also set up alerts if anyone attempts to access the account, she offered kindly. Yes, please, I replied. And I'd like documentation of all previous transactions for my records. Next came the more difficult call, my credit card company. I had added Olivia as an authorized user on my high-limit credit card for wedding emergencies, a courtesy she had apparently been using freely based on the recent statement that had arrived. I need to remove an authorized user immediately and cancel that card, I told the representative. And I'd like to dispute several recent charges. Can you identify which charges specifically? The woman asked. As I reviewed the statement, my stomach tightened. $600 at a high-end makeup store. $850 at a luxury shoe boutique. $320 at a spa. None of these were wedding expenses, just Olivia treating herself on my credit line. The total amount in dispute is $1,770, I said after identifying the personal purchases. We'll begin the investigation right away, the representative assured me. In the meantime, we've canceled the card and issued you a new one with a different number. By 9 a.m., I had secured my finances and documented everything. Opening my phone for the first time since the previous night, I found 37 missed calls and 62 text messages. The group chat had evolved from mockery to confusion to anger, as my family realized I had actually followed through on my promise to withdraw financial support. Olivia's text progressed from dismissive to panicked 8:47 p.m. Very funny, Teresa. Put the money back. 9:16 p.m. Seriously, stop being childish. 1:038 p.m. The wedding venue needs the final payment tomorrow. 1:152 p.m. Oh my God, are you really doing this? Answer me. 1:24 a.m. You're ruining everything. I was just joking. 3:45 a.m. Please, Teresa, I'm begging you. We'll lose our deposit. 6:08 a.m. This is unforgivable. You're dead to me. 7:30 a.m. Mom says you have to call her now. My mother's voicemails showed a similar pattern of escalation. Teresa, stop this nonsense and call me back. This isn't funny, young lady. Your sister is in tears. I didn't raise you to be this selfish and vindictive. Whatever issues you have with me or your sister, this is not the way to handle it. Please, Teresa, we can work this out. Just put the money back, and we'll talk. Most surprising were the messages from Jason and his parents, who had previously barely acknowledged my existence. This is Jason. We need to discuss the situation immediately. Call me. Teresa, this is Harold. This behavior could have legal consequences. I suggest you reconsider. Hello, Teresa, Vivian here. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Let's meet for lunch and sort this out like adults. The threat of legal action briefly concerned me until Sarah's husband Brian, an attorney, assured me over breakfast that I had done nothing illegal. The joint account was established specifically for wedding expenses with your funds, he explained. You had every right to withdraw your own money, especially given the circumstances. Armed with this reassurance, I began composing responses. Not to the emotional manipulation from my mother or the threats from Jason's family, but a single factual email addressed to all parties involved. The subject line read, "Documentation of wedding contributions and withdrawal of financial support." The body detailed $1,000 engagement gift check dated 6 months prior, $5,000 initial deposit, to wedding account bank transfer dated 5 months prior, $3,700 payment to venue, withdrawal dated 4 months prior, $3,000 payment to caterer, withdrawal dated 3 months prior, $2,000 payment to photographer, initial deposit dated 2 months prior. Total contributed $14,700. Total withdrawn $6,320. Net contribution to date $8,380. I concluded with, "As I have been explicitly uninvited from the wedding, I have withdrawn my remaining financial support. The funds already spent represent my gift to Olivia and Jason. I will not be contributing any additional funds. Any further communication regarding this matter should be in writing only." Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send, then forwarded a copy to my personal email for records. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone rang continuously, notification after notification piling up. I silenced it again and looked at Sarah. "What now?" I asked, suddenly feeling the weight of the confrontation ahead. "Now we get you ready to face them," she replied firmly. "Because you know they're going to insist on a face-to-face meeting." Sure enough, by noon the tone of the messages had shifted. My mother wrote, "Family emergency meeting at our house 3 p.m. today. Everyone will be there. This needs to be resolved in person." Sarah squeezed my hand. "I'm coming with you." "You don't have to do that," I protested weakly, though relief flooded through me at her offer. "Yes, I do," she insisted. "You need a witness and someone firmly in your corner. Besides, I've been wanting to tell your mother what I think of her parenting for about 15 years now." For the first time in 24 hours, I laughed. It was a small sound, fragile and uncertain, but it reminded me that whatever happened with my family, I wasn't truly alone. As 3 p.m. approached, I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead, clutching a folder containing printouts of every transaction screenshot and message exchange. The truth was finally coming out, and though the process was painful, I couldn't help feeling that it was long overdue. Sarah's compact SUV pulled into my mother's driveway at precisely 2:55 p.m. The number of cars already parked along the street confirmed my suspicion this wasn't just a small family meeting. This was a full tribunal. "Remember," Sarah said as we gathered our things, "you have nothing to be ashamed of. You're not the one who lied, manipulated, and mocked a family member." With her words bolstering my courage, I walked up the familiar path to my childhood home, folder of evidence clutched tightly against my chest like armor. The living room fell silent as we entered. My mother sat in her favorite armchair, looking both angry and somehow smaller than I remembered. Olivia occupied the center of the sofa, eyes red-rimmed and puffy. Jason stood behind her, hand possessively on her shoulder. His parents perched stiffly on the love seat, wearing identical expressions of contained fury. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins who had participated in the group chat mockery filled the remaining seats, and stood along the walls. My uncle Robert, my father's brother and the only relative who had not participated in the group chat, nodded slightly in acknowledgement from his position by the fireplace. His presence surprised me. We had always gotten along well, but he typically avoided family drama. "Who is this?" my mother demanded, gesturing to Sarah. "This is Sarah, my friend and witness," I replied calmly. "She stays or I leave immediately." Before anyone could object, I continued. "I've brought documentation of all financial contributions I've made toward the wedding, as well as copies of the group chat messages from yesterday." "We don't need to see your spreadsheets," Jason interrupted, voice dripping with the same condescension I'd heard from his father. "We need you to return the money you stole." "I didn't steal anything," I corrected him. "I withdrew my own funds from an account I established specifically for wedding expenses, an event I've now been explicitly uninvited from." "It was just a joke," Olivia wailed, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "We were just teasing you. How could you take it seriously?" I pulled out my phone and read aloud, "You're not invited to the wedding. Goodbye, loser." Then I looked directly at my sister. "Please explain the humorous part of this message," she faltered, looking to our mother for support. "Teresa," my mother began in the placating tone she'd perfected over decades, "you know how your sister gets when she's stressed. The wedding pressure has been overwhelming, and sometimes people say things they don't mean." "And the heart emoji you added," I asked. The finally comment, was that also stress-induced? My mother had the grace to look uncomfortable. I was just trying to smooth things over by celebrating my exclusion. Before she could respond, Harold cleared his throat loudly. "This back and forth isn't productive. The fact remains that without the final payments which were supposed to come from that account, several vendors may cancel. The venue requires the remaining $4,000 by tomorrow." "That's no longer my concern," I replied evenly, "as I've been uninvited from the event." "We're re-inviting you," Olivia burst out. "Okay, you can come, you can be a bridesmaid again, whatever you want." The naked desperation in her voice might once have swayed me. Now it only confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't about wanting me at the wedding. This was about needing my money. "I've already contributed over $8,000, I said. "That's my wedding gift to you. I won't be adding any more." Jason's mother leaned forward, her designer outfit impeccable despite the tense circumstances. "Teresa, surely we can discuss this reasonably. Perhaps we all got off on the wrong foot. We would be delighted to have you at the wedding." "The invitations were already printed without your name," my cousin Emma blurted out, then immediately looked mortified as all eyes turned to her. The room fell silent. The implications of her statement hung in the air. "When were the invitations printed?" I asked quietly. No one answered. When I repeated more firmly, 3 weeks ago, Olivia finally admitted in a small voice. "So this wasn't a spontaneous joke. This was planned. You knew 3 weeks ago that I wouldn't be invited yet. You continued to accept my money." The uncomfortable shifting and averted gazes around the room confirmed what I already suspected everyone had known. Everyone except me. Uncle Robert, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "I've sat here listening to everyone dance around the truth, and I've had enough." "Yes, Teresa. It was discussed at the Sunday dinner 3 weeks ago, after you left early for your work commitment. I objected then and I'm objecting now. This family should be ashamed." A ripple of murmurs and objections rose from the assembly, but Robert continued. "Olivia announced that the wedding would be more elegant, without Teresa there to bring down the tone. Your mother suggested waiting to tell you until after the final payments were made. Jason's parents indicated they preferred a certain caliber of guest, and everyone else either agreed or said nothing." He looked around the room, his disappointment palpable. "I stayed silent too long, and for that I apologize to you, Teresa." The raw truth laid bare was both devastating and strangely liberating. My family hadn't simply made a thoughtless mistake in the heat of the moment. They had calculated and conspired, seeing me as nothing more than a financial resource to be drained and discarded. Harold, apparently deciding a change in tactics was necessary, adopted a more conciliatory tone. Mistakes were clearly made on all sides. However, the practical reality remains. The venue needs payment by tomorrow, or they'll release the date to another couple. The deposit was $9,000 and is non-refundable. We can solve this problem, Vivian added quickly. If Teresa is unwilling to contribute further, Jason's father and I can cover the remaining expenses. For a moment, hope visibly rose in Olivia's expression, only to be dashed by Harold's next words. With certain conditions, of course. If we're now financing the majority of this wedding, we would expect appropriate adjustments to the guest list, venue choices, and other details to reflect our preferences. What does that mean? Olivia asked, voice small. Simply that some of your more casual friends might be replaced by our business associates. And perhaps the band you selected isn't quite right for the caliber of event we envision. Small adjustments. As Olivia's face crumpled, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Sympathy for my sister's position, vindication that Jason's family was revealing their true controlling nature, lingering hurt over the betrayal, but mostly a growing certainty that I needed to extract myself from this toxic dynamic permanently. I've said what I came to say, I announced, standing up. I've documented my contributions. I've explained my position. The choices you make going forward are your own. You're just going to leave, my mother demanded. After destroying your sister's wedding plans? I didn't destroy anything, I replied calmly. I simply stopped enabling a situation where I was being used and disrespected. As Sarah and I turned to leave, Olivia rushed forward, grabbing my arm. Please, Teresa, don't do this. I'm sorry about the text. I'm sorry about everything. We can fix this. Looking into her tear-filled eyes, I saw the little sister I had protected and loved. I also saw the grown woman who had participated in humiliating me for years. Both were real. Both were Olivia. I hope your wedding is everything you want it to be, I said, gently removing her hand from my arm, but I won't be there to see it, and I won't be paying for it. That chapter of our relationship is over. As we walked out the door, Uncle Robert followed us. I'm proud of you, he said simply. It's about time someone in this family stood up for themselves. Driving away from my mother's house, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't a natural part of me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time it was truly mine to navigate. 3 days after the confrontation at my mother's house, the full impact of my decision began to ripple through the family. My phone continued to alternate between aggressive messages demanding I reconsider and guilt-inducing pleas about the disaster I had caused. I maintained my silence, focusing instead on the strange new feeling growing inside me, freedom. Sarah invited me to stay with her and Brian for a few days, concerned about my emotional state. While grateful for their support, I decided returning to my own apartment was an important step in reclaiming my independence. I need to face this on my own terms, I explained as Sarah helped me pack my overnight bag. Besides, hiding only reinforces the idea that I've done something wrong. Just remember, our guest room is always available, she insisted. Day or night. Back in my apartment, I was unpacking when a knock at my door startled me. Peering through the peephole, I was surprised to see Uncle Robert standing in the hallway. Hope I'm not intruding, he said when I opened the door. I wanted to check on you, and I have some information you might want to hear. Over coffee at my kitchen table, Robert filled me in on the aftermath of my departure from the family meeting. It was chaos after you left, he said, shaking his head. Olivia had a complete meltdown when Jason's parents started listing all their conditions for financial help. Their guest list additions would have pushed out half of her friends. They wanted to change the venue to their country club, which couldn't accommodate the wedding for another 6 months. He took a sip of coffee before continuing. When Olivia objected, Harold made a comment about beggars not being choosers. That's when Jason showed his true colors. What happened? I asked, both dreading and needing to know. He sided with his parents completely, started criticizing Olivia for mismanaging the wedding funds and alienating you when they needed your money. Said if she had been more strategic about handling you, none of this would have happened. My stomach turned at the calculated manipulation this revealed. Poor Olivia had been caught between Jason's influence and our mother's enablement, while I had been the convenient target and funding source. Your mother tried to smooth things over, but it backfired spectacularly, Robert continued. She suggested they just scale down the wedding to what they could afford now, and Vivian acted like she'd suggested serving fast food at the reception. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for my sister. So what's happening with the wedding now? Postponed indefinitely. They couldn't make the venue payment, so they lost the date. Olivia and Jason had a huge fight afterward. From what I've heard, they're taking a break while he stays with his parents. The news left me with conflicted emotions. I took no pleasure in Olivia's pain despite her role in causing mine. Yet there was an undeniable sense of justice in the situation coming to light so quickly. There's something else you should know, Robert said, his expression growing more serious. After everyone left, I had a long talk with your mother. Asked her how she could have let things get to this point. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. She admitted something I think you deserve to hear. For years, she's encouraged Olivia's dependence on you financially because it made her feel less guilty about favoring Olivia emotionally after the divorce. The revelation stung, even though it only confirmed what I had long suspected. She said, and I'm quoting here, "Teresa was always so capable, she didn't need me like Olivia did. It was easier to let Teresa take care of herself and focus on Olivia's needs. She justified letting you support Olivia by telling herself you were just naturally generous and didn't mind." I stared out my window, processing this confirmation of years of maternal neglect, disguised as confidence in my abilities. Did she ever consider what it cost me, not just financially, but emotionally? I asked her that, Robert replied. She cried and said she'd never allowed herself to think about it that way. Your competence became her excuse for taking you for granted. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of this truth settling between us. I'm not telling you this to hurt you more, Robert finally said. But I thought you deserved to know the full picture. Your mother is starting to recognize her role in creating this dynamic. Whether that leads to meaningful change or just temporary guilt is yet to be seen. After Robert left, I spent hours reflecting on our conversation. The truth was painful, but there was also relief in having suspicions confirmed rather than continuing to question my own perceptions. The following week brought further revelations as extended family members began reaching out individually. Cousin Emma called, tearfully apologizing for her role in the group chat mockery. I just went along with everyone else, she admitted. It felt easier than standing up to Aunt Catherine or Olivia, but watching you stand your ground made me realize how wrong we all were. Even my mother eventually sent an email rather than her usual manipulative phone calls. Its contents surprised me with their uncharacteristic self-reflection. Teresa, I've spent days trying to find the right words. There are probably none that can adequately address the hurt I've caused you. Robert forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about my parenting. I realize now that I've consistently placed Olivia's needs above yours, justifying it by telling myself you were strong enough to handle it. In doing so, I failed to recognize that even strong people need support, recognition, and love. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness. I'm not even asking for a response to this email. I simply want you to know that I am truly seeing my behavior clearly for perhaps the first time, and I am deeply, profoundly sorry. If you ever decide you're willing to talk, I will be here ready to listen rather than defend or explain away my actions. I read the email multiple times, searching for the usual guilt trips or subtle manipulations. Finding none, I saved it without replying, not yet ready to navigate the complicated path of potential reconciliation. The most surprising communication came 2 weeks after the confrontation, when I received a text from Jason, "Can we meet? There are things about Olivia you should know." After consulting with Sarah and Brian, I agreed to meet Jason at a public coffee shop near my office. His appearance shocked me. He looked haggard, the polished veneer replaced by stubble and rumpled clothing. "The wedding's officially canceled," he announced without preamble. "Olivia broke up with me 3 days ago." I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, neutrally, unsure why he had requested this meeting. "Don't be. It's better this way." He stared into his untouched coffee. "Look, I was terrible to you and I owe you an apology, but there's more you need to understand." Over the next hour, Jason revealed the disturbing dynamics that had been at play. His parents had seen Olivia as unsuitable from the beginning, but had decided to make her presentable rather than oppose the marriage. They had encouraged him to isolate her from supportive influences, including me, while increasing her dependence on their financial support. They saw your connection with Olivia as the biggest threat, he explained. You represented independence, a safety net outside their control. They suggested I find ways to create distance between you two. And you went along with this, I asked, struggling to keep the disgust from my voice. I did, he admitted, avoiding my eyes. I've spent my whole life seeking their approval, but watching everything fall apart these past weeks made me realize I was becoming exactly like them, controlling, manipulative, obsessed with appearances. While his confession explained much, it didn't excuse his behavior or erase the pain caused. Why tell me this now, I asked. Because Olivia is drowning, he said simply. She's lost everything: her wedding, our relationship, her self-respect, but worst of all, she's lost you. She won't reach out because she believes she's destroyed your relationship beyond repair. She participated in humiliating me, Jason. She planned to take my money while excluding me from her wedding. Yes, she did, he acknowledged. Influenced by me, my parents, your mother, but still her choice. I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm just sharing what I know, that I'm out of both your lives for good. As he stood to leave, he added, for what it's worth, when she finally stood up to everyone, including me, it was because she realized how terribly she'd treated you. She said, I've become someone my sister wouldn't even recognize and certainly couldn't respect. After he left, I sat alone, absorbing everything I'd learned. The truth had finally emerged layer by painful layer. The question now was what to do with it. In the 3 months following the wedding cancellation, I focused on rebuilding my life and healing from decades of family dynamics I now recognized as unhealthy. The first step was therapy, something I had considered for years but always dismissed as unnecessary. I'm handling things, I'd tell myself. I'm the strong one. Dr. Lewis, a compassionate therapist specializing in family trauma, helped me see how that self-perception had become both a shield and a prison. Being the capable one became your identity, she observed during our 3rd session. It gave you value in a family system that might otherwise have overlooked you, but it also trapped you in a role that allowed others to take advantage of your strength. Each week we unpacked another layer of my family history. The parentification I experienced after my parents' divorce, the financial manipulation disguised as helping family, the way I had internalized the message that my worth came from what I could provide rather than who I was. Healthy families don't have one member consistently sacrificing while others take, Dr. Lewis explained. They have reciprocity, boundaries, and mutual respect. Learning to establish those boundaries proved challenging but essential. I started small, setting up automatic responses to family messages that read, I'm taking some personal time and will respond when I'm ready. This simple act of self-protection felt revolutionary. Meanwhile, my social circle expanded in unexpected ways. Sarah had always been my closest friend, but now others stepped forward, creating what Dr. Lewis called my chosen family. My coworker Denise invited me to her monthly book club. My neighbor Michael included me in weekend hiking trips. My college roommate Lucia, with whom I'd lost touch, reconnected after seeing my social media posts about personal growth and invited me to visit her in Colorado. Blood makes you related, Lucia told me during that restorative weekend in the mountains. But love and respect make you family. You're redefining what family means for yourself. Despite building this new support network, I couldn't completely escape awareness of my biological family's activities. Social media ensured that news occasionally filtered through my mother, taking a meditation course, my aunt mentioning family therapy, and eventually photos from a small backyard gathering captioned Olivia's garden wedding. The images showed my sister in a simple white dress surrounded by just a dozen guests. No elaborate venue, no designer details, no visible influence from Jason's family. She looked genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in years, her smile reaching her eyes as she cut a homemade cake. I felt a complex swirl of emotions seeing those photos, happiness for her simpler celebration, lingering hurt over my exclusion, and curiosity about this apparently scaled-down version of her dreams. I closed the app without commenting and went for a long walk, allowing myself to feel everything without judgment. A month later, an unexpected letter arrived in my mailbox, handwritten, not typed. The return address belonged to my teenage cousin Zoe, Aunt Susan's daughter, who had been present at the family confrontation but hadn't participated in the group chat mockery. "Dear Teresa," she wrote, "I've wanted to reach out for months but wasn't sure if it would be welcome. I need to tell you that what you did changed things for more people than you know. Watching you stand up to everyone, refusing to be treated badly even by family, showed me what real strength looks like." She continued, "After you left that day, I told my mom I was disappointed in her behavior. It was the first time I'd ever directly challenged her. Since then, we've had honest conversations about respect and boundaries that never seemed possible before. You created ripples that are still moving through the family." Zoe's letter touched me deeply. The idea that my stand for self-respect had positively influenced someone else made the difficult journey worthwhile. I sent her a brief but warm reply, thanking her for reaching out and expressing pride in her courage to speak her truth. 5 months after the confrontation, I received a text from Olivia. "I know I have no right to ask, but would you consider meeting for coffee sometime? No pressure. I understand if the answer is no." I sat with the message for several days, discussing it with Dr. Lewis during our session. "What do you want from this potential meeting?" she asked. "And what boundaries would you need to make it healthy for you?" After careful consideration, I replied to Olivia, "I'm willing to meet. Tuesday at 3 Cornerstone Coffee on Michigan Avenue." The coffee shop I selected was busy enough to provide background noise, but configured with enough private corners for a difficult conversation. I arrived early, selecting a table that offered some privacy without feeling trapped. When Olivia walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the carefully maintained appearance she had cultivated under Jason's influence. Her hair was shorter, her clothing simple, her face free of the heavy makeup she had adopted during their relationship. "Thank you for coming," she said, softly sliding into the seat across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I replied honestly. An awkward silence stretched between us, years of unspoken truths and fresh wounds, creating an almost visible barrier. "I don't know where to start," she finally admitted. "Why not the beginning?" I suggested. "Why did you send that text?" She took a deep breath. "The honest answer is complicated and also simple. I sent it because I was turning into someone I didn't recognize, someone who valued appearance over substance, who cared more about impressing Jason's family than honoring real relationships." She explained how gradually, almost imperceptibly, she had been influenced by Jason and his parents to see me as an impediment to her acceptance into their social circle. They would make these subtle comments about your clothes, your car, your job, like you weren't quite good enough. And instead of defending you, I started seeing you through their eyes. Her voice broke. "The worst part is that while I was trying to impress people who ultimately didn't care about me, I was hurting the one person who had always been there for me." The text wasn't impulsive, I noted. The invitations had already been printed without my name. "Yes," she acknowledged, not attempting to deny it. "That was after a dinner where Vivian made some comment about how family like Teresa might make their friends uncomfortable. I agreed to remove you from the guest list, telling myself it was just one day and you'd understand eventually." And the group chat mockery. Tears filled her eyes. That was unforgivable. Jason and his friends would often joke cruelly about others, and I started adopting that behavior, thinking it made me sophisticated. Mom joined in because she thought it was bringing us closer. None of that excuses it, but that's what was happening. We talked for 2 hours, untangling the complex web of influences, choices, and consequences that had led to our estrangement. Olivia didn't make excuses, but took responsibility for her actions. I shared how her betrayal had forced me to confront patterns I had enabled for years. "What happened with the wedding?" I finally asked. "I saw photos of a small ceremony. After everything fell apart, I took a hard look at what I really wanted," she explained. "It wasn't the elaborate event Jason's parents were pushing for. It wasn't even Jason once I saw who he truly was. I ended our engagement, got a new job, and started therapy. The small garden wedding, she told me, had been for her friend Melanie, where Olivia had served as maid of honor. Seeing her happy, uncomplicated celebration helped me realize what actually matters. As our conversation wound down, Olivia asked tentatively, "Where do we go from here?" "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "I can't go back to our old relationship, but I'm open to building something new based on mutual respect and boundaries." She nodded, understanding the implicit condition: no more financial dependence, no more taking advantage of my generosity. "I'd like that," she said softly, "whatever form it takes." We parted with a brief, slightly awkward hug, making no specific plans but leaving the door open for future contact. It wasn't a magical reconciliation, but it was an honest beginning. Over the following months, our communication remained cautious but consistent. Brief texts about our daily lives, occasional coffee meetings, a shared lunch when our paths crossed downtown. Each interaction represented small steps toward a new kind of relationship, one where I was no longer the automatic provider and she was no longer the entitled recipient. My mother's journey toward awareness proved more gradual. Her initial apology email had been sincere but incomplete. Through occasional, carefully boundaried phone calls, I watched her struggle to recognize patterns established decades ago. "I always thought I was helping Olivia by giving her extra support," she told me during one such conversation. "I never considered I was actually teaching her to be dependent and entitled." 6 months after the confrontation that changed everything, I wrote in my therapy journal, "Today I realized I haven't checked my bank balance with anxiety in weeks. I made a donation to a cause I care about without calculating if someone in my family might need that money. This is what freedom feels like." The experience transformed my relationship with myself as profoundly as it changed my family dynamics. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for healthy relationships. I discovered that my worth isn't determined by what I can give others, but by the simple fact of my humanity. Most importantly, I found that sometimes walking away from toxic situations, even temporarily, is the most loving choice you can make for everyone involved. Standing firm when my family tested me was the hardest thing I've ever done. It would have been easier to give in, to transfer the money back, to accept the half-hearted invitation extended only to secure my financial support. The old Teresa would have done exactly that, swallowing her hurt for the sake of family harmony. But by choosing self-respect instead, I created the possibility for something better, not just for me, but for Olivia, my mother, and even young Zoe, watching and learning from the sidelines. If you're facing similar situations with family members who take advantage of your generosity or kindness, remember that real love includes boundaries. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do, both for yourself and for those who have grown accustomed to using you, is to say no and mean it. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? What happened when you did? Share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is never determined by how much you give or sacrifice for others.